what's going on now. Are we good? What's going on, folks? Hello.
Good morning, Mayor. We're just having some technological difficulties right now. If we could just mute ourselves and wait, we'll be on our way soon.
Thank you.
All right, so we will call the 8th meeting of the Corporate Service Committee to order. We currently are experiencing some issues putting our meeting on our website. So if you're tuning in, please use the YouTube, or if you know somebody who wants to tune in, let them know to go through our YouTube channel to watch the meeting, because it's currently not shooting on our website. So the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489 extension 2425. To make a request for this specific meeting, please contact csc@london.ca. I'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I'll go to our consent agenda, and I'll look to committee to see if they want anything pulled. And if you're not on camera or video, you could just raise your hand from your Zoom device. Deputy Mayor Helmer?
Thank you. I'd definitely like to hear from staff on item 2.1, and I potentially might vote differently depending on what they say. So I think maybe we should pull it just to be on the safe side.
Okay. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, Madam Chair, I don't want it pulled. 2.2, I do have a question as well on 2.2, but I don't want it pulled.
Okay. Anyone else wants anything pulled from the consent agenda? Okay. I'll need a mover for the balance. We're pulling 2.1, and I'll need a mover for the balance. Mayor Holder, seconded by Councillor Hopkins, and we'll call to question.
Chair,
Yes.
I would like to make some comments on one. I know I don't need it pulled, but I'd like to comment on the
yes,
FCF.
I apologize. Before we vote, we'll do comments, and we'll go to Councillor Hopkins first. I think she wanted to make a comment on 2.2, and then we'll go to Councillor Morgan after.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. 2.2 is the 2019 year-end capital monitoring report. And I want to thank staff. I know we are basically receiving and approving the report. But my question I do have through you to staff is on C. And I wonder if staff can just follow up a little bit more with I understand we're mitigating the financial impacts. We're going to have to deal with the effects of COVID in our 2020 budget, but the 422.5 thousand, I want to have a better understanding exactly what we're doing to mitigate our 2020 budget by removing the funding from one area to the economic reserve fund. Just a little bit more clarification, if I may, through you.
Thank you. We'll go to Mrs. Barbone.
Hello, thank you, through the chair. So specifically what we're doing is we're trying to create a little bit of capacity by funding through changing sources of financing, so that because this is funded through capital levy currently, if we are able to then allocate it from the reserve fund, what that does is it preserves some of the funding from our operating budget that would allow us to have a surplus of that amount of money to help offset what the projected deficit is for 2020. So essentially, we're just alternating and changing the sources during this year. These are just some of the preliminary steps that we were able to identify as part of our capital budget review. So this is just one of the things that we've started. It's not significant in the grand scheme of what our projected deficit is, but it's certainly something that we felt was a simple, easy thing to do that would at least starting to help us in the right direction.
Thank you for that. I know it's not a large amount in the great scheme of things, but I want to thank staff for the work that they are doing in preparation as we start to deal with the effects of COVID and our 2020 budget, and understand that we're not really affecting the capital budget or the capital project. All we're doing is just changing the financing. So the 2020 budget is not being affected. So thanks for that, and back to the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. We'll go to Councillor Morgan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to provide some brief comments on the report that I provided on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Board of Directors meeting in March. I didn't write a cover letter report because everything has pretty much changed since we've had that meeting, and colleagues have heard my previous updates on the activities of the FCM since that meeting. I know the mayor wrote a great op-ed today about the challenges that municipalities are facing and the work FCM, the Big City Mayors Caucus, is doing. And so I think council is relatively up to date on the activities of the FCM. So you have the information on the March board meeting there before you. But many of those activities that we've been engaging on have been shifted to our most recent advocacy efforts on the support for municipalities related to the financial challenges that we are facing. And subsequent to that, my work on the Elections Readiness Committee as Vice Chair will be ramping up in the next little while as we ask individual board members to engage with specific MPs across the country on support for the FCM's ask. So most of the work that we're doing now is not necessarily contained within my report, but I did want to provide the report as I usually do on our board meetings. So that's all I have for now, and I'll keep colleagues updated on FCM activities, as I know the mayor will as well.
Thank you, and you can say hi to Max for us. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll call to questions. And we're voting on the consent agenda in the exception of 2.1. Councillor Van Holst? You have to unmute yourself.
There we go. Yes.
Deputy Mayor Helmer?
Yay.
Councillor Morgan?
Yeah, Max and I both vote yes.
Mayor Holder? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hopkins.
Don't forget me. Yay.
Mayor Holder? You have to unmute yourself, Mayor.
After Anna Hopkins, it's my honor to say yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
I'll put 2.1 on the floor, which is the 2019 operating budget year and monitoring report. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Thank you. I wonder through the chair if Ms. Barbone or her team would like to speak to this report. I know that it's the year-end sort of summary of what happened with the 2019 budget from the operating side, and there's a lot of things going on in that report, and I'd just like to hear from the treasurer about it overall.
Mrs. Barbone?
Yes, thank you through the chair. So just to give you a bit of an overview of the report. So really there's the three sections. We have the top property tax supported budget. We have our water, as well as our wastewater and treatment budgets as well. So essentially what this does, and I'll go through the property tax supported part. On page 5, there's a really good summary that summarizes what our key year-end position is. So if you will recall at our mid-year monitoring report, we had projected that there was going to be approximately $4.5 million of surplus that we had identified. And that had been allocated to provide support throughout, to mitigate some of the pressures that we were facing throughout the 2020 and MYB budgets. So through council approval, that $4.5 million was allocated at the budget sessions during deliberations and was fully spent. So what you can see is that 4.5 is removed. So we were fortunate enough at our year-end position to have an additional $3.2 million surplus that is available for to support council and the city's financial position. So notwithstanding the policy, what we have as part of the policy is that the city treasurer can allocate any portion to support our year-end targets to meet the contingency balance in the reserve fund. And as you know, we are not at that target yet. We're still quite a ways below it. So in light of the projected deficit for 2020 and the significant financial challenges that we have before us, I am recommending that remaining $3.2 million, as was identified in the COVID report that we had put forward that got approved by council last week, would be allocated towards the contingency and then would be available to support the balance and to then allow us to have a source to draw from should we be requiring money to support the deficit position that the city has. So from a property tax perspective, that's what is reflected in the recommendations. And you can see in the first column of that table 1 chart that the $3.2 million has been allocated and that the year-end position has a zero balance because all of the surplus has been fully allocated from the 2019. So with respect to water and wastewater, again, there were slight differences in what was projected in terms of the surplus, but relatively similar to what had been identified. So given the positions of those have been allocated to the various contingency reserve funds as per the policy to support those water and wastewater treatment budgets. So I think really that is all at a high level. So you'll note that there were a couple of areas that we did have some other surpluses that are reflected in the recommendations to be allocated to support the deficit experienced in LMCH, which is approximately $400,000. That and also the small amounts that have some surplus in the traffic and control streetlights energy savings, as well as the fleet management, are going back to support their reserve funds and the future costs that as those programs have mitigated through some savings, we're putting them back from where they came. So I hope that that is a fulsome enough overview. I'm happy to provide more if you'd like.
Deputy Mayor Helmer, do you have any further questions?
That was very, very helpful. I appreciate the work that everybody's doing across the organization to keep financial discipline intact all the time, and especially we're seeing the benefits of that as we run into some really difficult financial circumstances now. I did want to hear from my colleagues, see if they have any questions.
Are there any other questions or comments? Mayor Holder.
Thanks, just trying to unmute there. I'm just acknowledging the city's debt management policy, and one thing that struck me was again, a recommitment to avoid the use of debt financing for life cycle renewal projects. To the treasurer, through you, do you anticipate any changes to that as a philosophy, or any arrangements around? By the way, page 34 for colleagues who are looking for that, or any issues around limiting debt financing as it relates to internal debt caps. If the treasurer might comment on that.
Thank you. Through the chair. So through the multi-year budget process, this is one of the fundamental principles that we employed. So as we went through the budget, this was exactly the principle that was utilized, and that we were able to remain within the debt cap that we had authorized over the course of the MYB. So what I would say is, based on at this point in time, we're within that debt cap. Certainly, as we review our internal policies and continue to review the impacts of COVID, I think one of the key things we're looking at is capital projects and as a whole. So I think at this point in time, certainly based on the existing capital plan that's before council, I don't believe we need to deviate from that at all. However, should there be additional projects that council would wish to spend, that would certainly, if they were financed through debt and not through reserve fund or other sources, could potentially put us above that cap. But I think it would need to, we would certainly look to our sources first. So, I think this is based on the existing projects and we're well within that, but we would certainly identify if that was an issue going forward should council wish to do anything new.
So as a follow-up through you, Chair, to the Treasurer, you know that through planning environment, we've got a number of major capital infrastructure projects that we've put in place. Are you seeing any impacts to what has been approved thus far, or any limitations on what you might anticipate as a result of going forward with our capital budget?
Through the chair, at this time, we are currently, so we've closed out all the 2019 projects and we are looking at what the 2020 and onward MYB has left us with. So I think the answer to that question, certainly what's based in the approved capital plan has sources of financing attached with them at this time. Should there be any changes that might occur throughout this year, if for instance, we were to receive additional funding through the feds, which has been requested through FCM, that would certainly support us and put us in a better position to be able to do potentially more of what it is that we have planned and to possibly relieve some of the cash needs that the city might have to provide some stimulus. That would give us some great support. Without anything, that would lead us to the next discussion where we might be potentially, depending on how long COVID situation goes and what our fiscal position is for this year, we will need to review. And I would suggest that as the 2021 update comes further, that is where, if there's any changes that need to occur, we would propose that be the vehicle that we utilize to make any changes if council needs to alter course for any reason.
Okay, thanks very much. That's very helpful.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I guess through you to staff. I'm still trying to understand a little bit more how concerned we should be about water and wastewater and the projects that we have lined up and the funding, and if there is sufficient monies available, not only for our projects, but for the use of water. And I'm just wondering if we, through you, to staff, if they can give us a better, I know we're talking about the 2019 budget and we're kind of balanced out, but how concerned or where are the concerns sort of moving forward in the 2020 budget with water and wastewater?
Mrs. Barbone.
Thank you. So through the chair, that I think it's a little early to know for sure. I think at this point, certainly we presented the report of all the challenges that we're undergoing through the 2020 budget as a result of COVID last week that was approved by council. It's still very, very early estimates. And I think they're based on a very significant number of assumptions at this point because it's still very early in the year as to how long the circumstances we're in right now is going to occur. And certainly from water and wastewater perspective, the greatest challenge will be looking at what the utilization of the water is going to be, because obviously that generates a significant proportion of the revenue. Part of that will also be what the impact is going to be on whether there is issues with collection and receiving the cash flow that we typically would receive. So it's a little early. I'm not raising any flags now, but I think in June, when we come forward with a more fulsome report for monitoring, we will be able to have a better idea of if there are any potential issues that we need to be concerned. It's particularly because that one's a user pay regime in terms of how most of that's utilized, that may have very different issues than, say, the property tax budget. So I think, certainly if consumption continues to increase because people are at home and using their water, then the budgets may not have as much of a challenge potentially as we might otherwise have anticipated. So that only time will tell as we get closer. So we're certainly, when we bring forward in June, we'll bring as much information forward so you'll have as much information that's up to date as possible.
Thank you for that. I think it's important that we look at that and look forward to the report as well.
Any other comments or questions? I need a mover and a seconder. Deputy Mayor Helmer and seconder Councillor Morgan, and we'll call to question. Councillor Van Holst.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yay.
Councillor Morgan.
Yes.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yay.
Mayor Holder.
Yes.
I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Thank you. So there are no scheduled items or items for direction, and we'll go to our deferred matters. We have one item. I need a mover and a seconder, and this item came from SPPC, and we had directed staff to look at the feasibility of using the same approach taken for affordable housing to reduce the effective tax rate for London Middlesex community housing. And it's been deferred to September 30th, and the reason being that we're experiencing COVID-19 emergencies. So I look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Van Holst, seconder, Mayor Holder. Any comments or questions from committee? No comments or questions. We'll call to question. Councillor Van Holst.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yay.
Councillor Morgan.
Yes.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yay.
Mayor Holder.
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
So we'll move now to our in closed session, our confidential agenda, and we will, I guess, wait till we shift around. Oh, we need a motion to do that, actually. Can I get a Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Van Holst? And Councillor Van Holst?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Helmer?
Yay.
Councillor Morgan?
Yes.
Councillor Hopkins?
Yay.
Mayor Holder?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And I think now we will shift the room and go offline.
Yes, closing the vote, that motion's passed 6-0. And just for the information of those who are tuning in, there are 6 reasons for closed session, and they are all outlined on the public agenda.
Report out of in closed session after, but it will not be on the public video on YouTube. It won't be on YouTube.